Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm so excited about this week's video because I've planned a menu that includes some of my favorite foods and in fact my all-time favorite meal. My goal was a budget of $10, but the cost did come in at $11. I do have some foods at home, so I don't have to try to get 21 meals out of this. However, I do want to get most of my meals from these foods. And I'll put the ingredients list with prices along with the meals I ate in the description area of my video. To start out with, I have a pound of dried pinto beans. Since I buy these in bulk, I just took these out of my own pantry, but I priced these with the price from Walmart, which is $1.08 a pound. And then for these corn tortillas, same situation, I priced these out from Walmart and they were $1.98. I love corn tortillas. There are so many things that I can make with these and I just never get tired of them. So these are going to be really great in my menu this week. And I guess I won't go over every single price. I'll just put the price list out for you. But I will say I got an excellent deal on this potato for 36 cents. I picked that up at Wholesome Choice. I also got the onion for 14 cents. And then at Walmart, they had this amazing deal. It was a manager's special for 33 cents for the avocados. I usually plan my menu around the sales, but not this time because I just was craving tacos and Mexican food. And so the stars just really aligned for me with those avocados on sale. And then I had this garlic clove. So I'm just going to count for half of this clove of garlic that I'm going to use. And then I also picked up this Anaheim pepper. I decided that I might want to try doing something with that. I also picked up a jalapeno for 6 cents. I have 6 eggs so I can make some of my breakfast. And then I have a half of a block left over of this extra sharp cheddar cheese. And then the tomatoes were another really excellent deal. At Walmart, these were 23 cents a pound, and I don't think I've ever seen them this low. They were probably just trying to get rid of these for some reason. But anyway, I did take advantage of it. And so let's see, I got about 1.5 pounds of tomatoes. And so that was only 35 cents. Those are going to go really far in my menu. And I forgot to set this out with the other food, but I did add 1 pound of long grain rice to this. I have a little mold on this cheese, but it's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off and the rest of it looks fine. I've created the kind of menu that I can do some meal prep today, which is Sunday, and then all of my meals will be quite easy during the week. And I'm going to start by adding some water to my cilantro, and I'll let that freshen up and put that in the fridge. And then I'm going to go ahead and make all of the beans now. And I did rinse and sort through my beans, but they were quite clean. And then I'm just going to use my Instant Pot. If I didn't have an Instant Pot, I would use my slow cooker. And then I'm going to add some salt. I do like salt in my pinto beans. It is one of those beans. I feel like they do need the salt. And then I'm going to add a little bit of onion to give some flavor and 1 very large chopped garlic. And these turned out delicious. So I'm going to go ahead and let these cool. And I'll start by cutting up the rest of my items. And first off, I'll grate all of my cheese. I'm going to be quite sparing with this cheese this week. I won't need the cheese for some of the meals that I'm making. But there are other meals where it's just going to add that little something extra that's going to make the meal pop. And this is my favorite cheese grater. I'll try to link this in the video. For this iceberg lettuce, I'm just going to cut off a small amount at a time because once it's cut, it does seem to go bad within a couple of days. And I have this container that I love. I use it a lot in the summer. I use it to make a salad bar, and I also love it for tacos. For the tomato, I'm just cutting up 1 tomato at this time. I'm going to have to be careful with the tomatoes, and those are another thing that I won't be using on every meal. However, I do want to kind of reserve them for some pico de gallo. And I've got some onion, and also I just put the cheese in a bag just to make sure that it stays fresh. And then I decided to use the last one for my cilantro. And I put a little bit of water in the bottom of this, and then I just did a super rough cut just to try to keep it fresh. This bunch of cilantro had the thinner stalks, so I'm expecting that this might not last me all week. Now I'm going to roast some tomatoes, and I just put a little oil on these, and I'm putting them into my roasting pan in my air fryer. But you can also roast them in the toaster oven or the regular oven. You really don't have to roast these. I'm just trying to sweeten them up a little bit. And I've seen some people make this where they don't roast the tomatoes at all. They just add them raw straight to the blender. So that's another option for you. And actually, there's another shortcut that I'll tell you about in a minute. But first, I'm going to go ahead and blend up these tomatoes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain them. I'm not positive on my entire menu, but I was kind of thinking of a couple of uses for this. First of all, I need to use the tomato sauce for some Mexican rice that I'm going to be making today. And then later in the week, I'm thinking about maybe making some chilaquiles roja, and that's with the red sauce. I've made chilaquiles verde, which is the green sauce, and I do love that. But since I haven't made the roja yet, I thought I would use this to make a red sauce. I'll start my Mexican rice by frying up some onion and a little bit of garlic. I'm also going to add a portion of the jalapeno in there. It'll give the rice some great flavor. And I did empty out some of the seeds in here. Sometimes when people add the jalapeno in, they just put the whole jalapeno in, but I do plan to eat this later, so I wanted to remove the seeds. And then I'm just going to add my rice. My rice has already been rinsed, and this is 2 cups of basmati rice, but you can use a long grain or jasmine. I do like the way basmati rice, the leftovers, the way the texture on it. So I think that this is a good rice if you're trying to make a big pot like this for the entire week, because it's gonna reheat well. So I toasted this on low heat for between about 5 and 10 minutes, just until it got a little bit toasted. And this already smells wonderful. And then I added in about 1/2 cup of the tomato sauce. If you wanted to take a shortcut here, you could just add a couple of tablespoons of canned tomato sauce here. And then you're going to add in your water and bouillon. I mixed my bouillon in with the water, and I used the Knorr chicken bouillon. I used about 1/2 cube. And for my basmati rice, use double the amount of the water to the rice. So for the rice, I had 2 cups dry, so I'm adding 4 cups total of liquid. But because I know I'm going to be reheating this, I think that that is the perfect ratio. If I was making this all for dinner tonight, I might add an extra 1/2 cup of liquid. And then I'm also going to add in just a touch of the red chicken bouillon. This is the one with chicken bouillon with tomato. I did taste the broth before I added it in, which I always recommend that you do, just to get an idea for the level of seasoning that it's at. So it felt like I could use a little bit more. That's why I added just a touch more of the red bouillon. But you could also add more chicken bouillon. You can also use vegetable bouillon here, and it will taste just fine. And I did find my Mexican oregano in my pantry the other day. I'd put these little bags into another bag, and I'm going to add just a small amount to this rice, and I should have put it in a few minutes ago, but that's okay. It'll still be fine. I'm going to let this cook for 25 minutes on low, and then I'm going to let it sit for another 5 minutes. I did have a little bit of this chicken broth left over, so I'm going to go ahead and add some onion to that and some jalapeno, and I think I also added garlic, but I think I might have edited it out of the video. And then I'm going to go ahead and blend that up, and I'm just going to add this to my tomato mixture, and then I'll have that red sauce ready to go. I just need to cook that red sauce a bit, and then I'm going to be able to use that for my future recipes. So I'll strain that, And then I'm just going to set that aside in a jar. I'll add that to a jar and put that in my fridge. And so my rice is done now, and it smells amazing. I'm going to give it a taste and see if it's done and how it tastes. And this, you guys, was, oh my gosh, it was so good. And I was so hungry, so I made myself a plate. And I always like to have some of the whole beans when they're first out. I added a small amount of the extra sharp cheddar to this tortilla and fried this up. I thought that would make a great accompaniment to the other items. And then I also decided to make myself a little bullet of pico de gallo. That's one of the things I love about having everything already pre-mixed. It just makes everything so easy. I'm going to have the easiest meals this week just to be able to come in here and get what I need. And there's such a variety of dishes that I can make with these ingredients. And these beans, guys, they turned out so good. They were perfectly seasoned, and I just love them when they're first done like this along with the broth. And the rice makes a super nice filler for a lot of my meals. Honestly, I could just eat tacos like every night with nothing else, but it's nice to have some kind of complete dinners with the rice. And also I'm going to be making some refried beans with those beans. I'm also going to be throwing some of those in the freezer because beans will only last so long. In fact, I only keep them about 3 days and then no more. I tried this jalapeno, and at first, the first bite, I didn't taste any heat at all, but I did on the second. I've also heard of some people adding in a piece of bell pepper. I think I might like the bell pepper better because I really just want the flavor. I don't want any of the heat. Or I might just pull out the jalapeno like I've seen a lot of people do. That pico de gallo, it just adds that little something extra that makes it such a wonderful meal. I would say we're off to a good start with this week's meals. This is the rice that I have left over. I probably have at least 4 more servings for that. And here are the beans. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and make some refried beans with one of them. And I'm going to put half of these in the freezer. I took the large container of beans and added those to my blender and made some refried beans. And this is my favorite way to do it. Obviously, you can just use a hand masher if you want, but this just works for me. And these beans turned out especially good this week. And I think it's because I blended up the onion in there when I cooked the beans. So I think from now on, I'm going to make sure and do it just like that because they were so good. For breakfast, I'm going to fry up all of this potato to make some breakfast potatoes. I've got a little bit of onion that I'm going to keep on the side just in case I need it for something else. And I made 2 different shapes of potatoes just in case I want to add some of the smaller dices to my tacos. I thought I would just make everything for my first breakfast, and then I'll put the leftovers in the fridge for my next meals. I do wish you could smell this right now. It smells so good. There's nothing better than potatoes that are fried up in a cast iron skillet with a little bit of onions and garlic salt. I'll probably be able to get 3 or 4 breakfasts with these. And at first I started wondering whether I should save back an egg because I was counting the eggs that I have left. I do have to conserve the eggs with the menu that I have. I was thinking of at least 2 other fun recipes that I want to make for breakfast that I'm going to need eggs for, but I did end up cooking that 3rd egg. The way I'm using these eggs, they go twice as far. I just spread a little bit of refried beans on a shell, and then I top that with the egg mixture and a small sliver of avocado. And then I put the pico de gallo on the side and the hash browns. And this is one of my favorite ways to eat eggs. It is so good. And here's one of my dinners. I just made some super crispy tacos. I love it when the shells are very crispy, although I do get in different moods. But this just has some refried beans, lettuce, tomatoes, and onions. And I added a little bit of Louisiana hot sauce because I do like that as a topping. And this is the Crystal brand. If you're a person that always has cheese on your tacos, you might be wondering why I don't have any on mine. Well, since I stopped eating so much cheese, I've realized that I love tacos even without cheddar cheese on the top. In fact, not having it on there allows me to better taste each of the ingredients. And especially with this, I have all of those wonderful things like onions, the tomatoes, and that crispy lettuce. It just all works together, especially with these crispy shells. That being said, I do still love sharp cheddar on my tacos at times, but I am saving that sharp cheddar. We don't have a lot of it, and I want to get the best use out of it. I love all of the discoveries I make because I eat on such a tight budget. And here was another repeat of my last meal, and honestly, I could eat this every morning this week and not get tired of it. And for this meal, I decided to add some cilantro into the tacos. And then for breakfast on this day, I decided to try some of the potatoes in the taco on the left just to see how I liked them added into the mixture with the refried beans and the egg. And it just kind of blended in. I actually think I like the potatoes better on the side because I think I've got a really good thing going with the combination of ingredients that are already in there. There's a creaminess to the ingredients, like the avocado and the beans and the eggs, that gets interrupted when you add in that potato. And then one night for dinner, I had some nachos, and this is actually one of my favorite dinners because it's kind of light. I usually fry my tortillas in the air fryer, but this time I fried them in a pan, which is actually, they come out a little crispier. And this time, was a little special though because I had the pico de gallo. I don't usually have that. I did have some nacho jalapeno slices in my refrigerator, so I did just use those. However, I did have half of the jalapeno that I could have just added to some vinegar and made my own. And you guys have seen me make those before. It's very easy to do. And then I just also made a little guacamole by just mashing it up and adding a little salt. This is one of my favorite dinners because it's fairly light and I usually just skip the cheese. And this night I ate so much food. I guess I was really hungry, but I had 3 full tacos and then I had a side of rice. And then the next night I decided that I wanted to make some enchiladas, and I just made 2 cheese enchiladas with rice and beans. For this, I just fried up my shells just lightly so that they would get a little bit of a better consistency and not fall apart. And then for my enchilada sauce, I used some of my tomato mixture, and then I added some of the tomato chicken bouillon. You can use regular chicken or vegetable seasoning here if you want. And then I added some chili powder. Typically, enchilada sauce has like guajillo chilies, but I have a shortcut where I just use regular chili powder and it works very good. And then I just added that in there and let this simmer for a while. And then I tasted it just to make sure that it was where I wanted. And then I thickened it up with a little bit of cornstarch. And I just kept adding very small amounts until it got to the texture that I wanted. And I do have this funny thing when I make enchilada sauce, I never make enough. So you would think that I would make a huge batch of this, but I did want to save some of that tomato liquid that I had for another recipe. I was in a hurry when I grabbed this foil at the store, And when I got home and I used it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thickest foil I've ever used. This family does not use this thick of foil. I must have paid so much more for this. In the winter, I bake my enchiladas in a casserole dish and I cover them. However, I'm taking shortcuts and doing things differently. So today I'm going to make this in my air fryer on the bake setting. And I didn't mention it when I was making the enchilada sauce, but I do like a mild enchilada sauce. If you're a longtime viewer, you've probably already seen my video on cheese enchiladas where I was trying to recreate my favorite restaurant meal. And I have to say, these are probably one of my all-time favorite budget meals because you can make these so tasty and so inexpensive. You really don't need very much cheese at all. And I am using the extra sharp cheddar. That is not my preference. I'm just trying to use up items that I have. Preferably you would have a little bit milder of a cheese like a Monterey Jack, or even that, I think it's that Fiesta blend at Walmart. It's got the mix of all three cheeses in there, the cheddar, the Monterey Jack, and I think Colby, but I'm not positive. But that's definitely a milder mix. When I made that enchilada video, I did try, my son and I actually, we were in the kitchen experimenting. We did use some guajillo chilies and we made it with those in one of the sauces. And then I also had the shortcut. I think in that one I used flour and made a roux, and then also used some chili pepper. And we both liked the one with just the regular chili pepper better. And anyway, I cooked these in the air fryer, then I pulled them out and I added the cheese, and then I just let that cheese melt. Like I said, I typically cover these because enchiladas will dry out, but didn't want to cover these in there. And I did not cook that for 15 minutes. I just only cooked it until the cheese melted. And here is the first plate. And I have no idea why I was putting this cilantro on there. I think I needed some green. But I want you to look at the beans on this plate. Now look at the beans on this plate. This was the next meal. And I thinned out the beans and I like those so much better, especially with the enchiladas. I do tend to keep my refried beans a little too dry. I like them more like this, and that's how they serve it also at my favorite Mexican restaurant, which I think I've told you guys before. It's Picante Martin. However, you can't go and eat there. You have to, it's a takeout place. Just kind of mentioning that because I do know I've got some viewers in my area here in Orange County, California. This is delicious. I would have preferred this with a milder cheese, but it still works with the sharp cheddar. It just interrupts a little bit with that creamy mouth feel that you get with cheese enchiladas because it's such a bold flavor. However, it was delicious. I love this meal. I love leftover enchiladas, and I also enjoy taking these in my lunch. So the next morning I made huevos rancheros, and as you can see, I've got dry beans again. I should have thinned those out. However, they were still delicious. This is probably one of my favorite ways to eat eggs, is just very simply frying up the shell, adding some refried beans and then a fried egg on top, a little crispy around the edges, and then some sriracha and a little bit of avocado and tomatoes and cilantro. Super delicious. And then of course tacos. And I never got tired of tacos. I ate a lot of tacos and I used the same ingredients all week. However, I never got tired of them because I was always making something new. I think that this has been my favorite week of eating on these budget meal plans. I always look forward to getting home and making my dinner, and I loved how quick and easy it was to create my dinner because I had all of these ingredients already prepped and ready to go. It just took a little bit of extra work on the weekend, but it just made for such easy weeknight meals. And I do actually have a lot of leftovers still. So I may share those meals with you next week because they are excellent low-cost meals. I do hope you enjoyed this week's video. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and thank you all for your support. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on